Welcome to Amateur Radio's Reflector Magazine by the East Coast Reflector. Volume 19 of the Reflector Magazine, August 2025. Articles featured in this volume: Dick's Corner, The Antenna Farm Antenna Feed Line, Space Weather, Ham Radio and the Heart of Hearing, Celebrity Callsign George Marti, Kinham's Counter Police Radar, an Open Mic Net Experience. You'll also find information on nets, user-submitted pictures, comics, Ask an Elmer, how to connect to ECR Town Hall, puzzles, ECR events, prayer list, silent keys, and more. Table of Contents.
Dick's Corner, WB2 JPQ. East Coast Reflector System and Reminders. RF link added via amateur wire. With Ham Shack hotlines shutting down at the end of August, the East Coast Reflector has added a new RF link via amateur wire. To connect to the ECR, dial 90036. To monitor, transmit by pressing *99. Unkey with hashtag. System timeout issues increasing. Recently, the system has seen a rise in timeouts. While some are caused by accidental mic keying, sitting on the microphone, most are from Echolink users. Mobile radio users, always use your microphone hanger. Every radio comes with one. Echolink users, please monitor your connections more closely. A single stuck connection can time out the entire network. Thank you to Kevin, KE7K. A big shout out to Kevin, KE7K, for providing timed audio segments from the Amateur Radio Newsline. Tune in every week, Sunday at 1 p.m. and Wednesday at 10 p.m. Call for repeater and node articles. Got a repeater or simplex node running 10 watts or more with an outdoor antenna? Blow your own horn. We're looking for write-ups for the Reflector Magazine. Send in a short article and a few pictures, showcase your setup, and inspire others. We also welcome just sending information on your repeater. We gladly write it for you. Ask an Elmer. Have questions about radio gear, antennas, or how to get started in amateur radio? Stop by our Ask an Elmer sessions on the first and third Thursdays at 8 p.m. Join Zoom at bit.ly/ECR Daily. Open Mic Net. Become a net controller. Interested in becoming a net controller? Our Open Mic Net runs Wednesdays at 8 p.m., and we'd love for you to be part of it. We run our nets from the Zoom room, and you're always welcome to drop in and see how it works. If you'd like to participate, just fill out a contact form to get started. Go to bit.ly/ECR Open Mic. ECR Town Hall. We held our third East Coast Reflector Town Hall meeting, and the turnout was again amazing. The feedback and questions helped us better understand what the community wants and how we can improve. These town halls are now a regular thing. Join us on Zoom every second Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time to learn, ask questions, and share your thoughts. Join Zoom at bit.ly/ECR Daily. Connect to ECR. Connecting to ECR is simple and no membership. It doesn't matter if or what club you belong to. No fees or permissions. Everyone is welcome, and if you have audio issues, we're here to help. Simply free. The way that air was meant to be.
Etiquette reminder. When is it okay to break into a QSO for a radio check? Answer: never. Be patient. It's just a radio check. There are hundreds, sometimes thousands of people are listening and enjoying the QSO. Please don't spoil it.
Calendar. All times are Eastern. The following events are on the Reflector. For connection information, go to bit.ly/ECR Connect. Weekdays 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. The Morning Brew Net. A fast-paced way net to start your day. Tuesday Night Tech Net at 8 p.m. Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Open Mic Net. Anyone can register to be a net controller. Fridays at 9 a.m. The Second Cup Net for a laid-back net. Fridays at 8 p.m. The Youth Net. Everyone is welcome to check in. Saturday at 11 p.m. The Trivia Net. Amateur Radio Newsline is on Wednesdays at 10 p.m. and Sundays at 1 p.m. We've also got HF Nets. On Thursdays at 10 a.m., join the 20-meter net on 14.317. And on Saturday mornings, join us for the 40-meter net at 9 a.m. on 7.245. For the following events, stop by the ECR Zoom room at bit.ly/ECR daily. Every day at 3:30 p.m. stop by for advice or just casual conversation. Ask an Elmer is on the first and third Thursdays at 8 p.m. ECR Town Hall, on the second Thursdays of the month.
The TechNet. The TechNet is Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern and lasts for about 2.5 hours. Here's the order of the net. First, we share any ECR announcements we may have. Next, we take notices of any silent keys from the ECR. Next, we take check-ins from hams who are new to the net, where you can ask your tech-related questions and respond to help answer others' questions. And finally, we take general check-ins by call district. Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. and you can view the log at bit.ly/ECR logs.
Field Day pictures from Toledo Mobile Radio Association and from Pioneer Radio Operators Society.
Thank you for a wonderful 2025 meet and greet. This year's meet and greet was even better than last year's. We had record attendance, a large number of very appreciated donated door prizes, a gorgeous view, and good weather. Most of the hams in attendance were within a few hours of the event, but we had hams from as far as Florida who came just to be with friends. The months of meetings and planning were well worth it. At the top of the list, as she has been every year, was W2EM/XYL Marti. She and Chuck, W2EM, handled the food and beverages. 2 little words, but one giant task. All of their time and effort made the day a success. We had hams that came especially for the food, and they weren't disappointed. Door prizes were phenomenal. We had so many this year. Many hams and clubs donated prizes. Please take note of the following call signs and give them an extra thank you when you see them. Their contributions added a fun and rewarding component to the event. We'd love to continue it as a tradition, so please keep that in the back of your mind this year. If you come across something you think would make a good door prize, please contact Dick at wb2jpq@aol.com. Mark, KE2EDS, took on this task this year and did a great job. It's his first year on the team, and we hope he continues through next year. Mark also donated prizes. His donation of the coffee basket and gift cards was greatly appreciated. W2 was not only well represented by some of their best hams, but they also graciously donated 4 $25 gift cards to DX Engineering. The Pros Club continued their gracious donations as they have every year and donated $50 DX Engineering gift card. Many of their members attended, including Tim, KD20NL, who led communications with his trailer, donated an amazing multifunctional flashlight in memory of Jeff, KC9TW, a silent key, and team member dear to ECR. Tim also donated some beautiful wooden HT holders. Steve AA2AG contributed to the talk-in frequency by bringing his mobile Starlink, allowing us to link nodes and repeaters to cover the entire area, ensuring nobody's questions went unanswered. Randy W2RBC donated the grand prize, a beautiful portable grill. He also donated 2 Baofeng 888s. Thank you so much. Sal W2 was a big part of planning the event. We appreciate all of his helping to make sure the event was a success. Unfortunately, Sal wasn't able to attend this year, but we look forward to seeing him again next year. A big welcome goes to N3ERB Angela and K2EAG. Angela, N3ARB CW Jewelry was a big hit. All throughout the event, the table was filled with people making CW bracelets and necklaces. Originally for the kids, but the adults couldn't resist jumping in. Her husband, Matt K2EAG, brought a large display of POTA material for everyone to check out. He also helped out Angie since there were so many people interested. Thank you to both of them for their participation and contributions. We hope to see you back again next year. Also greatly appreciated were WB2JPQ, ICOM HT V3UC, oscilloscope, and internet radio, we'd like to give a big thanks to our other door prize donors. So many people helped to make the meet and greet possible. We'd also like to thank Bill, N2BH, and Corey for always being available and helping wherever needed. Al, K8BAC, and Teresa for making the trip from Michigan to help throughout the event. Thanks to Scott, W2BLT, for setting up his coffee station, Dan, KD2VNU for grilling the hot dogs, and of course, Dick WB2JPQ, Joe KO4FRR, and Vicky K8VKY. Thank you, everyone, for helping to make this a big success. See you next year.
The group photo from the 2025 meet and greet in the casino building at Chestnut Ridge Park in Western New York. More pictures from the meet and greet. I'll tell you about a few of them as we go through them. The building of the event. Team members Kevin VE3BZ and Press W2PW. Dick WB2JPQ's portable repeater. KD2ONL's communication trailer. Top right. Our chefs taking a break. W2EM, W2BLT, KD2VNU. On the top right, N3ARB and her CW jewelry table.
The new ECR helpline. If you're having connection issues or repeater issues and need help connecting, call our helpline at 746-427-4142. We'll help you the best we can. Also, if you find a major problem on the system, please report it to the same number at 746-427-4142. This is not for bad audio or rude hams. This is for things that need current attention, like someone sleeping on the mic about to time out the system or someone being very aggressive. We appreciate your help.
Ask an Elmer Zoom event. Ask an Elmer be an Elmer. Join us on the first and third Thursday of each month. Come in and ask for help and get respectable answers from a family-friendly environment. If you don't have any questions, just come on in to watch and listen.
East Coast Reflector nets. We have the Morning Brew, the Tech Net, the Open Mic Net, the Youth Net, and we even have HF nets on 20 and 40 meters. ... The
Antenna Farm by Charles, KC6UFM. Part 34. Antenna Feed Line. Hello, ECR family, and welcome to the Antenna Farm. This is your friendly antenna farmer, Charles, KC6UFM. As always with the Antenna Farm topics, I welcome any and all feedback from you, the reader. I am almost always monitoring the East Coast Reflector, and my email is on my QRZ page. I am also on the ECR for almost every Tuesday night TechNet, so this would be a great place to ask questions too. Feel free to reach out to me with any comments or questions. But there is a new and, in my opinion, great place to ask questions about the Antenna Farm or antenna systems in general. Join me, along with other Elmers, in the East Coast Reflector Zoom room on the first and third Thursdays of each month at 8 p.m. Eastern for the Ask an Elmer/Be an Elmer event. This is a chance for all hams, especially those new to the hobby, to ask questions that may be too involved to get answers from the TechNet. I look forward to you joining us and asking your questions. Yes, I know. I had said that we were going to be looking at antennas for space communications, but I've received a large number of questions about feed lines, and I decided to hold off for a month on the space antennas in order to address those questions. In short, if I received nearly 100 emails and other contacts with questions on feed lines, there are probably several times that many other people with similar questions. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of feed lines, a few caveats are in order. First, this article is not going to get into the mathematics and physics of exactly how feed lines work. This is going to be a very real-world, practical view of when to use a given feed line. Second, in some cases, we're going to be seeing performance differences that are very small, sometimes as little as 0.01 dB difference. The fact is that in practice, it takes a difference of about 3 dB for the change to be noticeable. In other words, if you double your transmitting power, a plus 3 dB increase, the receiving station will just barely be able to detect the change. By the same token, if you cut your transmitting power in half, a minus 3 dB decrease, the receiving station will again just barely detect the change. And in case you're wondering, all those report to how an operator went from the noise to 20 over S9 by increasing their power from 10 watts to 11 watts. That's called propagation. Lastly, cost plays a big part in the selection of a feed line. When combined with the above paragraph, how much are you willing/able to pay to get a performance increase that the station you are trying to communicate with won't be able to notice? Types of feed lines. Honestly, I don't know how many different possible feed lines there are. A number around 1,000 wouldn't surprise me one little bit. For this article, however, we're only going to look at 2 basic feed line designs that are by far the most common in ham radio. Open wire feed lines. There are a few variations of open wire line, but they are all essentially a pair of wires spaced at some fixed distance from each other and separated by some insulator or another. The diameter of the wires and the spacing between them, along with the dielectric constant of the insulation, defines the characteristic impedance of the line. Open wire lines are commonly available in 300, 450, and 600 ohm impedance figures. As a rule of thumb, the more non-air insulation between the wires, plastic, foam, whatever, the higher the loss will be. With that said, open wire lines have much lower loss than any coaxial feed line. A common myth about open wire line is that it must be kept far away from other conductors. In a way, this is true, but not for the reason you might think. A properly designed and installed open wire line is no more susceptible to interference or coupling than coax. The problem is that in the wind, open wire line can twist and potentially contact nearby metal like mast poles, or short the 2 wires together. More commonly, the movement will cause the space in between the 2 conductors to change, and so the impedance will vary. There are standoffs that will hold the open wire line in place, and about 3 to 6 inches away from the mast or other objects to prevent shorting. There are 3 types of open wire line in common use. Ladder line is an open wire feed line where standoff-style insulators are placed at regular intervals along the run to hold the wires in place relative to each other. Ladder line is distinguished by the use of small, rod-like spacers between the wires at fairly large intervals. The advantage is that this very limited non-air insulation between the wires allows for the lowest possible practical loss over the line. The biggest disadvantage to ladder line is that rain, snow, and, in some cases, even dirt on the conductors will impact the impedance. Usually the effect is small and can be ignored, but in a few cases, the impact can be enough to cause issues. This image is a typical ladder line feed wire. Twin lead line is the old TV type feeder that you've probably seen. Technically speaking, twin lead is not a true open wire line because the wires are enclosed. There are a couple variants. Flat line is, well, flat and uses some form of solid plastic for the insulation. There's an oval-shaped type that uses a foam plastic insulation. In both cases, the actual wires are fully enclosed in the insulation. Twin lead has the highest loss of the open wire lines, but still much lower than coax. The oval variant with foamed insulation has slightly less loss than the TV flat line. The advantage to twin lead is that the effect of contamination on the wires is very small. Below are typical twin lead feeders. Window line is a compromise between ladder line and twin lead. The distinguishing factor is that window line has a solid or foam plastic insulation that encloses the wires, but there are large sections of the insulation cut out to form windows in the line. The goal of window line is to get the low loss of ladder line and the resistance to contamination problems of twin lead into a single product. Overall, window line does just that. As I said, however, window line is a compromise. The loss is higher than with ladder line, but less than with twin lead. Below is a sample of window line. There's a problem with open wire lines. The several names are often confused or used incorrectly, interchangeably. Strictly speaking, The terms I've used above are the correct names. That does not guarantee that everyone else will use the right names. One final thing to know about open wire feeders is that they are balance lines. You will need a matching network and balun to connect to your radio and perhaps to the antenna as well. Coaxial feed lines. Coaxial or coax. Feed lines are made up of a wire conductor surrounded by insulation that is then encased in a second conductor in the form of a tube, usually braid, foil, or an actual pipe. There is usually an outer insulating jacket as well. Here is a typical coax feed line. One rule to remember. In terms of commonly available cost-effective cables used by hams, all coaxialines have significantly higher loss than open wire feed lines. With that said, coax is far and away much easier to work with. And the simple fact is that all ham radios and commercial radios pressed into amateur service are set up to use coax. Coax comes in a wide range of characteristic impedance values, but most ham radios are set up for a nominal 50 ohm line. Hams will commonly use, for various purposes, 50, 75, and 93 ohm coax on a somewhat regular basis. The characteristic impedance of coax is determined by the outside diameter of the center conductor, the inside diameter of the shield, and the dielectric constant of the insulation. The final thing to remember about coax is that it is an unbalanced line. While coax will connect directly to most radios, you may need a balun and matching network at the antenna end. The basics of feed line loss. All feed lines have loss. Sorry, but that's the way things are. Along with this is that you must have a way to get the signals back and forth between your antenna and radio. So you must have a feed line, and therefore, you're going to have loss. The trick is to minimize the loss. For the purpose of general discussions, a 3 dB loss will cut your signal in half and will be just detectable by the receiving station. In a practical sense, if you have 3 dB of loss in the feed line and your transmitter puts out 100 watts of RF, the antenna will see only 50 watts. If the loss is 6 dB, then the antenna gets 25 watts. Once again, however, how much time, work, and money are you willing to spend to get the lowest loss possible? That's a question only you can answer for yourself. While the characteristic impedance of a feed line is based on the sizes of conductors, the space in between them, and the dielectric constant of the insulation, loss is mostly a function of the insulation between the conductors. If you want to be a purist, the DC resistance of the conductors also impacts the loss, but unless the run of the feed line is very long, this can usually be ignored. The perfect feed line will have a vacuum surrounding the conductors, but for obvious reasons, this isn't practical for ham radio use. That said, there are some commercial and military installations where the feed line does indeed exist in a hard vacuum. Since a vacuum isn't really practical most of the time, the next best option is air. As an aside, the difference in the dielectric constant of a vacuum and that of air is about 0.06%, not enough to worry about in nearly all cases. A pair of conductors separated only by air is the best real-world ham radio feed line, but for runs of any length, this is not practical either. The wires will move in relation to each other, and as I mentioned above, this changing spacing of the conductors will cause the impedance to change. Not a good situation. So came about ladder line. The vast majority of the insulation between the wires is air, but there are enough insulating rods to keep the conductors from moving relative to each other. Flat twin lead evolved next, but here the insulation is 100% solid plastic, and the loss is significantly higher than ladder line. Because of this, the move toward the foamed insulation, or dielectric, is an attempt to get more air and less plastic between conductors. Window line came next. The idea was to remove even more of the plastic and get more air into the dielectric, and, as I mentioned earlier, it worked. By and large, window line is a good compromise. You have only slightly more loss than with ladder line, but you have the ease of use of twin lead. A similar evolution happened with coax. There are 3 basic kinds of coax available. Solid dielectric. The insulation is made from some form of a solid material like Teflon. The material must be flexible enough to allow bending, but the ease of this varies. Generally speaking, coax with solid insulation has the highest loss of all coax cables. Foam dielectric. In this variation, the insulation is a foam material, similar to the foam twin lead. The idea is to reduce the plastic and increase the air and the insulation. Most modern coax cables are made with foam dielectric because it has lower loss than the older solid types. Gas dielectric, as the name implies, gas dielectric coax has some gas or another as the insulator. In this family, there are some pretty esoteric designs that are rarely, if ever, seen in ham radio. The common factor is that the outer conductor, the shield, must be a solid gas-type pipe. This means that we're talking about what is commonly called hardline. Essentially, we're looking at a pipe with a wire suspended in the center of the pipe, using beads of insulation to maintain the spacing, and the pipe flooded with some gas or another. The gas might be air, but other gases like nitrogen, helium, argon, or others are often used. This system can also be used for pulling a vacuum as the dielectric. The one common thing that gas dielectric systems have is high cost. Even air systems can be very expensive. With that said, gas dielectric systems have the lowest loss of all coax cables. We also must consider how well the impedances of the radio, the feed line, and the antenna are matched. In a perfect world, all three will have the same impedance, purely resistive, and so the Viz wars 1 to Q. But the world is not perfect. This is important because as the VSWR mismatch increases, so does the loss. The last thing to be aware of is that for all feed line types, loss increases as the operating frequency increases. Again, we're not going to get into the physics of why this happens. We're just going to accept it and be aware that while a particular feed line might be just fine at HF, it can have unacceptable losses at UHF. In order to strike a balance between cost, performance, and ease of use, the vast majority of ham radio installations will use foam dielectric coax cable as the feed line. Loss of common feed lines. Feed line loss is measured in decibels, usually abbreviated as dB. A change of 3 dB changes the value by about a factor 2. As an example, if my transmitter is putting out 100 watts and I add an amplifier able to give me 3 dB of gain, I'll be outputting about 200 watts. Inversely, if I have 3 dB of loss, I'll only see about 50 watts. Note, the 3 dB to a factor 2 concept is a rule of thumb and is not exact. This is for rough estimates only. As mentioned earlier, feed line loss increases with frequency. This is important because in most real-world ham radio installations, the same feed line will be used for a fairly wide range of frequencies, often from 160 meters all the way up to 70 centimeters. You need to keep in mind that the feed line must be selected for the worst-case scenario, that is, the highest operating frequency. The gold standard for feed line loss figures is the manufacturer's data sheets. Maybe there are a few problems with the data sheets provided by most manufacturers. First, the figures are usually expressed in terms of dB loss versus frequency for some length of the coax, rarely used by hams. The length is typically either 1,000 feet or 100 meters, about 328 feet. Few hams have more than 300 feet of feed line, let alone 1,000 feet. Yes, it's easy to convert into a more real-world length, but that adds a step. Second, the information is often presented in the form of a graph that can be confusing for some people. Third, there are many variations of most cables, low loss, ultra-flexible, direct burial, etc., and the figures apply to just exactly one of the variants. Wading through the tables to find the exact cable you're looking for is both time-consuming and prone to errors. Fourth, a particular manufacturer will list data only for their own version of the cable. So if you want to compare, you'll need to go through several data sheets and compile your own comparison list. And fifth, while the use of the mil-spec, military specification, identifiers might seem like a good solution to the above issues. Think again. Mil-spec sets the minimum performance requirements, so there is nothing at all preventing a manufacturer from exceeding the specification, and some do. Also, mil-spec is not uniformly or regularly enforced. Data from the DoD in 2022 found that just under 40% of items fail to meet their reference mil-spec. Lastly, a mil-spec can and does change. Unless you have access to both the specification and the specification change orders, you have only a rough idea of what the actual requirements are. In most cases, it's safe to just go with the manufacturer's data sheets. Just keep in mind that there may be some variation from batch to batch, and that you must be sure you're looking at the right cable. Over the years, I've compiled a table below listing the loss of common feed lines used by hams. The loss is expressed as dB per 100 feet, a more realistic number. A careful review of the table will serve to reinforce the narrative above regarding general performance of cables. To use this table to select a feed line, decide the maximum operating frequency at which the cable will be used. Look down the table from the highest frequency to see the loss at that frequency for the various cables. Find the lowest loss figure, and that will be the theoretical best cable to use. Remember that cost plays a big factor in your selection. Ask yourself if the reduced loss is worth the extra cost. There's also the fact that connectors for some of the more esoteric, lower loss cables like LMR, 600 hardline cost significantly more than top quality connectors for more common cables. Then we have to go back to the fact that a 3 dB change will be just noticeable. If an expensive feed line will give less than about 3 dB lower loss than a cheaper cable, the less expensive cable may be a better overall value. Also, your time is worth something. The simple fact is that in almost all cases, installation of open wire and hardline coax is more time consuming than the installation of flexible coax. And be careful about the open wire feeders. The extreme low loss may be attractive, but you will need a matching network to connect the line to your radio and, perhaps, the antenna itself. These matching transformers add both cost and, more to the point, additional loss. In many cases, the added loss of the matching networks will be more than you save by going with the open wire feed line in the first place. Conclusion: the proper selection of your feed line is an easy, cost-effective way to boost your station performance. The single biggest thing to keep in mind is that everything is a compromise of juggling costs, labor, and performance. One of the most amusing things to me are the ads for NMO-type mounts. The ads play up the fact that an NMO is good to 3.5 gigahertz, which it is. Then they put 18-foot of RG58C cable on the mount. The loss of that cable at 3.5 gigahertz is a whopping 10.1 dB. If your 23 centimeters radio puts out 10 watts, a fairly typical value, the power reaching the antenna will be well under 1 watt of RF. Who exactly thought this was a good idea? Personally, I never use RG8X for anything. I can get times LMR, 240 for the same price. It has lower loss, and is just as flexible as the RG08X. Even with that known, I only use LMR, 240 for in-shack jumpers less than 2 foot long. Below 450 megahertz, I tend to use either Belden 9913 or times microwave LMR 400. At 1,300 megahertz, I use times LMR 600. For duplexer cans, I use 9913 exclusively below 1,300 megahertz. Your mileage may vary. Your exact choice will depend on many factors other than loss. Again, cost is a big consideration, perhaps bigger than the performance itself when you consider the 3 dB change needed to make a real-world difference. If you do a little bit of homework, you can pick a feed line that will serve you well and make your station stand out crowd. Next time on the Antenna Farm, we're going to go on to the series of related articles on antennas suitable for space communications work, including satellites, ISS, and EME. If you know of an antenna construction article on the web, please drop me a note with the pertinent information, and I will look at it for consideration as an article for the Antenna Farm. Take care in 73. Charles, KC6UFM.
The text check-in line. Grab a pencil. The ECR has a unique way to get more people on the air. Our nets can be so busy that people have a difficult time getting in. We want to help everyone get on the air. So here it is. 716-317-9050. Text your call sign to 716-317-9050. This will get you onto the log. This is not for ins and outs. It's to help get people on the air and through the pileups. Text your call sign to 716-317-9050.
ECR Town Hall Virtual Meeting. The ECR is at it again. You matter. Stop by our ECR Ham Town Hall meeting. hear announcements and learn about new events, offer suggestions, or find ways to help. We didn't get this big by thinking of ourselves. We did it by thinking of you. Stop in and help us get to know you. It's the second Thursday of each month in the ECR Zoom room. That's 8 p.m. Eastern at bit.ly/ECR daily.
A printable RJ45 wiring diagram.
Nets. The ECR has nets for everyone, including HF nets.
Pictures from the week of the meet and greet.
Space Weather by Randy W. 2RBC. As amateur radio operators, we often learn about the weather here on Earth. But did you know that there is also weather in space? Known as space weather, it can have a significant impact on our technology and even our daily lives. Space weather is the result of solar activity, including solar flares and coronal mass ejections, CMEs. These events can send streams of charged particles towards Earth, which can interact with our planet's magnetic field and cause a variety of effects. One of the most well-known effects of space weather is the aurora borealis, or northern lights. These colorful lights are caused by charged particles from the sun colliding with particles in Earth's atmosphere. However, space weather can also have negative effects on our technology. When charged particles interact with satellites and other electronics in space, they can cause disruptions and even damage. This can lead to issues with communication and navigation systems, as well as potential dangers for astronauts in space. In addition, space weather can also impact our power grids here on Earth. When charged particles interact with our planet's magnetic field, it can cause electrical currents to flow, which can overload and damage power transformers. This can lead to widespread power outages, as was the case in Quebec in 1989. To better understand and predict space weather, scientists use a variety of tools and instruments. One such tool is the Solar Dynamics Observatory, SDO, which constantly monitors the sun and its activity. Another important instrument is the Space Weather Prediction Center, SWPC, which provides forecasts and alerts for potential space weather events. As amateur radio operators, it's important to be aware of space weather and its potential impact on our technology and infrastructure. By staying informed and understanding the science behind it, we can better prepare for and mitigate the effects of space weather. In addition, studying space weather can also lead to exciting careers in science and technology. From designing and launching satellites to developing new methods of predicting and monitoring space weather, there are many opportunities to make a difference in this field. So next time you look up at the night sky, remember that there is more to space than just stars and planets. Space weather may not be as visible as the aurora borealis, but it plays a crucial role in our daily lives and technology. By learning about and studying space weather, we can better understand and appreciate the complex and fascinating world beyond our planet.
Connections Printable. There are many ways to connect to ECR. For a printable list, go to bit.ly/ECR Connect. There, you will find the information to connect via ADN, DMR, DV switch, Echolink, Hamshack hotline, Hams over IP, IRLP, and Yaesu Fusion.
The Reflector Magazine is on YouTube. The Reflector Magazine is available on YouTube. You watch along on the pages and listen to the voiceover. It's great for blind, visually impaired, people who prefer to listen to the audio, or people who need something to listen to while they mow the lawn. If you know of someone who would benefit, pass it along.
Jigsaw puzzle. Enjoy a simple little puzzle right here on your device. The Morning Brew is a light-hearted, fast-paced net. Check in and tell your barista your answer to a simple question to get your morning brain started. Mobile check-ins are given priority. Don't want to deal with the pile-ups? Text your call sign to 716-317-9050 to get on log.
Pictures of the Lancaster Amateur Radio Association Clubhouse.
Ham Radio and the Hard of Hearing by Harry Lythall, SM0VPO. Introduction. On several occasions, I have been asked to give some advice or suggestions to radio amateurs who have impaired hearing. The last occasion was a young man who was almost deaf, but he does still have some weak hearing sense remaining. Running solely digi modes is not always so rewarding. After a while, you can get bored with relying on the computer as the sole means of communicating. There are, however, other methods that can be used to assist your hearing and regain some of the functionality of analog radio. A lot depends on your degree of deafness and your engagement to overcome the impediment. It is quite normal for people to become to some degree deaf with age, and my first experience in this matter was in the late 1960s, when my Uncle Arthur could no longer hear the television. In order to hear the TV, he had to screw the volume up really loud, but he never heard the neighbors banging on the walls. My auntie was also plagued with excessive volume. My uncle resigned himself to a life without TV sound. This was okay to watch the Tiller Girls on Sunday night at the London Palladium, but not much good when trying to follow the Sweeney, a UK detective series. So, I fitted a pair of hi-fi headphones to the TV and used a resistive splitter to feed the TV's internal loudspeaker and the new headphones. I also fitted a 3-pole power socket and an isolation transformer so that the headphone outlet was earthed, just a simple safety precaution. When Arthur next wound up the volume to the normal cacophony it heard, it was too loud for him. He had to reduce the volume a lot and was able to hear the TV without disturbing the neighbors or his wife. As a radio amateur, the problems can be similarly easily fixed or perhaps treated in a slightly different manner. With age, the ear sensitivity falls, typically by about 10 dB to 20 dB at 1 kHz. According to the governments, frequencies above 8 kHz do not matter, and if you have only 10 dB loss at 1 kHz, then you are considered to be fit. My own hearing is good to about 15 kHz, but it is not flat. I have about 8 dB loss at 1 kHz, which I believe is quite good. At 10 kHz, I have about 20 dB loss, but this is also quite reasonable and usable. Impaired sensitivity. Communications quality headphones have a limited frequency response, as they only need to reproduce 300 Hz to 3.5 kHz. So instead of using your ICOM or Yaesu Communications headphones, couple the output of your radio to the hi-fi stereo amplifier and plug in a pair of hi-fi headphones. Hi-fi headphones have several qualities that can be of use. They can block out your surrounding background noise from the TV and family, so that you can concentrate more on the sounds from the HF radio. These hi-fi headphones usually have a much greater signal handling property in order to give a good dynamic range. Good for listening to Beethoven? This aspect you can use to turn the volume up a lot and get a sound that is easier to listen to. They often have a small loudspeaker inside the headphone capsules, so they can take a watt or so of audio. I recently found a pair of Bose noise-canceling headphones in the electronic rubbish skip. Someone had spilled coffee on them, and it had begun to ferment. I put the ear pads and protective cloth in the washing machine, and they now look like new. The actual headphone chassis was washed in fresh water, as was the speaker elements, which have a plastic cone. They work perfectly. When I switch on the phones, it is like I go totally deaf. All background noises disappear. At first, it was a bit unnerving as my own voice was also attenuated, but you soon get used to it. Impaired frequency response. It is normal to use communication quality headphones with HF radio. These often operate up to about 4 kHz. Even for a normal person, there is a noticeable roll-off with frequency. If you have an impaired high-frequency response, then these will only make matters worse. In the days of SW and MW radio, the upper frequency limit was only 4.5 kHz, but by emphasizing the treble frequencies, you can get an effect of a wider frequency response. So once again, instead of using your ICOM or YSU Communications headphones, Couple the output of your radio to your stereo amplifier and plug in a pair of hi-fi headphones. If you have a graphic equalizer, then you can push up the HF response by typically 20 dB and even reduce the bass by 20 dB. In effect, you can get a perceived 30 dB to 40 dB improvement in your hearing frequency response. This should be more than enough for most people. Morse code CW. To detect CW more easily, there are a few other tricks you can weave, especially if you have independent left and right volume and tone controls on your hi-fi stereo amplifier. You can feed both channels with the same monaural signal, L, but adjust the left-hand channel for high bass response and adjust the right-hand channel for high treble response. The crossover should be about 750 Hz. This will spread the audio spectrum, 0 to 4 kHz, out in front of you and give you a spatial sound display. Different audio frequencies will appear to come from different directions. As you tune through a CW signal, you will hear the tone move from left to right, or the other way, depending on which way you tune the radio. Several different simultaneous CW signals will each have their unique position in the stereo image. You can also use a simple 1-to-1+1 audio transformer and drive both channels in opposite phase, which will cause a cancellation in the middle and make sound appear to come from the sides. This trick can also be used to help you pick out audio CW tones. If your ears are not the same, then the balance control can be used to balance your hearing so that you can get some resemblance of normal symmetry. With all of these suggestions, you may find it of benefit to use CW filters, but with a decent graphic equalizer, you may find the CW filter of little or no help whatsoever. Simple aids. You can feed the headphone signal via a 0.1 microfarads capacitor to the base of BC547 or 2N2222. An LED with 220 ohm resistor in the collector will then flash in sympathy to the incoming audio. In this event, the LED will flash quite nicely when you receive CW signals, especially if you have the CW filter switched on. You can decode CW without hearing anything at all, or simply use the LED as an aid in the corner of your eye whilst listening. Vision can supplement your hearing in this way. Another trick is to use your sense of touch. The old speaker from a defunct AM/FM radio can be connected in parallel with your radio speaker and placed in your shirt pocket. Have the diaphragm placed against your chest. In this way, you will still have your hands free for operating and writing, but you can also feel the sound on your chest. You will not normally damage the diaphragm, unless of course you are YL, winky face. Computer aids. From Windows Vista onwards, MS operating systems also have an inbuilt speech recognition program. I have begun using this with ham radio, not because of a hearing defect, but because I can turn down the volume at night and let the computer display speech to text. The quality is not very good, but since the vocabulary is so small, the program has little difficulty in displaying speech. You tend to see the same garbage text time and time again, but when I read CQ Doggy's Ray, it takes little imagination to realize that the spoken words were CQ Dog X-ray. Pronunciation. When someone has difficulty hearing oneself speak through bone conduction, pronunciation can become a little different, making it harder for the other person to understand your speech. It can be even more difficult for other ham radio operators to understand the spoken word over 10,000 kilometers with QRM and through a little 2-inch speaker. In this event, it can be an idea to use the hi-fi once more and put on those headphones. Turn up the treble and use a microphone to listen to your own voice while you speak. Pronunciation can be improved with a little practice, even if you do not have any hearing difficulties. English spoken by a non-native English speaker can often sound somewhat strange, as I found out when I started learning Swedish. To be perfectly honest, I think that some New Zealanders could use the training. But joking aside, it is often difficult to hear your own speech when speaking a different language. I have used this technique as a training aid when speaking Swedish. Just try listening to a native English speaker trying to say, SJU sjuka sjukskoderskor. Fun with impaired hearing. Now you may think that this is a bit tasteless, but you can have a bit of fun with loss of hearing. I found this out by accident when I wanted to deter cats from coming into a particular area of the house. So I bought a nice little 10-watt tweeter, discant, loudspeaker, and connected this to a crude multivibrator and audio amplifier. I adjusted the frequency so that I could not hear anything because the frequency was too high. Then I screwed the volume up to maximum, 10 watts. It worked a treat. It was too uncomfortable for the cat's acute hearing, and such high frequencies are particularly uncomfortable for them. But what I did not appreciate was that my own hearing response had fallen, and that tone I could not hear was only about 16 kilohertz. Unfortunately, most of the guests to our house could hear it excruciatingly plainly. Majlis, and I wondered why people often wanted to leave our house quickly. One more point of interest is that people who can hear the tone have trouble identifying the source. So if you download a signal generator app for your iPhone, then you can have a lot of fun on the commuter train or the Underground Railway. You can even add a little something extra to your doorbell with the tweeter outside the front door. Just imagine the burglar alarm you could make. A little 150-watt AF amplifier could scare the shit out of unwanted guests and even phantom doorbell ringers, the local kids. If you can think of any good uses or more ways to have fun with this, then please let me know. Best regards, Harry, Lunda, Sweden. Message board. Original article. sm0vpo.com. Check out Harry's YouTube video, Saving Money Number 5. Tech Gargabe. Thinking outside the box. For tech-related money-saving tips.
Audio check. There's a great audio tool on the website at eastcoastreflector.com. Now we have a second audio feed. One has a 2.5-minute delay, and the second is real-time. If you need an audio check to hear what your audio sounds like, load up Listen live on the website, pick up your radio, give your call sign, and say, "This is an audio test." No response necessary. Still stumped? Come into our Zoom room for advice at bit.ly/ECRdaily.
Hawaiian QSL cards courtesy of hamgallery.com.
Be a contributor. Want to help contribute to the magazine? Send in your article, project, story, comment, and suggestions to editor@ecr@gmail.com. You don't have to be a good writer if you have a good story. Everything will be published and sent to you before it's published.
Test your knowledge or maybe practice a little at a time. Try the short 11-question quiz from the general exam over antenna structure limitation, good engineering, good amateur process, beacon operation, prohibited transmissions, and retransmitting radio signals.
Want to see where you are on the log? Watch along. Go to bit.ly/ECR logs to get access to view all of the net logs.
Field Day Pictures featuring Ronnie, Radio Association of Western New York.
Celebrity Callsign W5GLJ, George Marti Remote Pickup Pioneer by Joe KD2TFB. George was a central figure in Cleburne, Texas. He was its longtime mayor, but radio people know him for the remote pickup and studio transmitter links he manufactured for many years. His gear was so popular that for decades, his last name became a common noun and a verb, much like Google. An early version of his gear is part of the collection of the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. In 1991, the National Association of Broadcasters honored George with its Radio Engineering Achievement Award. Our celebrity has been described as a man whose technical and business acumen changed the course of the broadcasting industry throughout the world and fueled scores of local, independent broadcast operations serving communities across the state. The Texas Association of Broadcasters awarded him its 2010 Lifetime Achievement Award. At the time, it called him a legendary Texas broadcaster. This celebrity call sign is W5GLJ, belonging to George Marti. He graduated from Central High School in Fort Worth at the age of 16 and attended a technical school for 9 months. He received his radio telephone first class and amateur radio licenses just prior to his 17th birthday. George cited his grandmother as influencing him more than any other person. He spent time at her house each day on his way home from the two-room schoolhouse at Oak Grove. When he was 12, she told him that he needed to make a business plan. He decided that his plan would involve establishing a radio station in Cleburne. George became a silent key in December 2015 at the age of 95. Joe KD2TFB.
Please take the time to check out Reflector etiquette. Being on a reflector is much different than being on HF. Reflector quality is the same as a phone, so there's no need to use phonetics. There are other tips available to read. You can read them in the magazine, in our welcome letter, or at eastcoastreflector.com. On the website, you can access the magazine, submit net questions, view the logs, and even watch the monitor to see who's talking.
ECR Gift Shop. Help to support the East Coast Reflector at the gift shop. Get your Callsign put on an ECR shirt starting at $17.68, coffee mug from $12.60, or a polo from $22.49.
Birthday Callsign word search. Try the birthday Callsign word search puzzle. Click on the magazine page and solve it online or to print it. If you'd like to be added to our birthday list, go to bit.ly/ECRBirthday.
The YouthNet. Join our YouthNet controllers every Friday night. Support the future of ham radio. Friday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
Pictures of Joe KO4FRR on his visit to the New York meet and greet. Can hams counter police radar? Electronic warfare, another step. 73 Magazine, May 1978. This is for entertainment purposes only. There is a growing interest among amateur radio operators in the development of a simple and inexpensive method to jam or otherwise defeat police radar units. This article is written to discuss the various methods I have used and to offer some suggestions for future work. Electronic warfare is a highly developed military science, the purpose of which is to render useless the electronic sensor and communications equipment of the enemy. This article will be limited to the narrow realm of CW Doppler radar jamming. The best place to start is to obtain an accurate description of the hostile unit, the police radar. A block diagram of typical police radar is shown in Figure 1. The radar consists of an unmodulated CW source, either a klystron or a solid-state gun or impact oscillator, a duplexer to isolate the transmitter and receiver, a common antenna, a detector mixer, and an audio frequency meter. Typical transmitter output power is in the neighborhood of 10 to 100 milliwatts. The transmitter frequency is 10,525 MHz, very close to the 10,000 to 10,500 MHz amateur band. Typical antenna gain is between 10 and 20 dB. In operation, radiation from the oscillator passes through the duplexer to the antenna, where it is radiated in a narrow beam. Energy striking cars is Doppler shifted by an amount proportionate to the car's velocity. The reflected energy is picked up by the antenna and fed to the detector mixer. Some of the transmitter output is mixed with the reflected signal. The detector mixer, usually a simple point contact diode of the 1N23 series or a hot carrier diode in the newer units, detects the difference frequency, which is measured by the audio frequency meter and displayed as MPH on a meter or LED display. An audio frequency meter is used because the Doppler shift is approximately 31.4 Hz per mile per hour velocity, or a speed of 100 miles per hour produces a Doppler shift of 3,140 Hz. Methods of deception. 1. CW jamming. This is the first method amateurs consider, but it is actually one of the least effective and most expensive. To use this method requires operation outside the amateur band. It also would be necessary to use a scanning receiver, a spectrum analyzer, and a voltage-controlled jammer oscillator. The receiver is needed to lock onto the exact radar frequency because the radar transmitter is not of crystal stability. Then the jammer must be offset from the radar's frequency by an amount equal to the desired false Doppler shift. Again, this method is expensive and requires operating outside the amateur band. 2. Noise jamming. Noise jamming is a technique pioneered for use against radars in the 1940s and is still effective today, but it's not for amateurs who wish to retain their licenses. Noise jamming consists of modulating a transmitter with broadband noise. The bandwidth of the noise spectrum is made large enough to cover the operating band of the hostile radar. Covering the police radar band would require a noise bandwidth of 10 MHz. The radar's receiver has a bandwidth of only 10 kHz. The result is that, by having to spread the jamming energy over 10 MHz, of which only 10 kHz is effective, only 1/1000th of the jammer power is being used. Also, this method requires operation outside the amateur band. 3. Baseband jamming. This method is the least expensive and most reliable method that I have tried. The method is simple and does not require operation outside the amateur band. It involves transmitting a tone-modulated carrier within the amateur band. Since police radars have an untuned front end, the detector mixer will act as a detector for frequencies outside the police radar band. If the jammer transmitter operating inside the 3 cm amateur band is amplitude modulated by, say, 3,140 Hz, the detector mixer will detect the 3,140 Hz tone and display a speed of 100 miles per hour. Hence, the radar can be deceived into reading any desired speed by merely modulating an oscillator by a tone corresponding to the equivalent Doppler shift for that speed. I have been able to deceive radar units as far away as 1 mile using this scheme with a 15 milliwatt gun oscillator and a 15 dB gain horn antenna. The schematic of the unit is included in Figures 2 and 3. Figure 2 shows the phase-locked synthesizer used to generate equivalent speeds of 1 to 99 miles per hour with thumbwheel switches. The design is a hybrid of CMOS and TTL logic because the parts were on hand. The design is not optimum, but it does work. Figure 3 shows the modulator which switches the gun diode oscillator on and off. The photographs show the car used for the tests. 4. Passive jamming. This area is most interesting in that no transmitter is used. In baseband jamming, the deception is accomplished by transmitting a tone-modulated carrier whose modulation frequency corresponds with the desired Doppler frequency. In passive jamming, it is the reflected ADAR signal which is modulated to produce the deception. This is accomplished by varying the apparent size or radar cross-section of your car. Using an inflatable car and varying the air pressure would work, but a simpler technique is to use an antenna with a varying impedance load. A test unit was constructed with a small horn antenna, pin diode switch, and dummy load. The switch is used to alternately terminate the antenna with the matched dummy load or a dead short. The net effect is an amplitude-modulated reflected wave that is capable of deceiving the police radar at ranges of only 20 yards. However, the addition of larger and more advanced antenna designs is expected to increase his range significantly. Conclusion: baseband jamming is the most effective and economic method for deceiving police radars. The circuitry is within amateur capabilities. A listing of suggested literature is included and is recommended for potential designers. This article has been limited in scope and theory with the intent that interested amateurs will be able to build workable equipment using these simple guidelines. This article does not cover the full legal problems, and for that reason, it would be interesting to hear from lawyer amateurs.
A list of useful links and our facilitators.
ECR Gift Shop. Help to support the East Coast Reflector at the gift shop. Get your Callsign put on an ECR shirt starting at $17.68, coffee mug from $12.60, or a polo from $22.49.
Radio Crossword Puzzle. Click on the original PDF of the magazine to fill out the amateur radio crossword puzzle.
The Trivia Net. The Trivia Net is a fun, unique net. Check into the net, and you'll be asked a multiple-choice question when it's your turn. Saturday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern.
Field Day Pictures of Lark. Lancaster Amateur Radio Club.
My open mic night experience. I remember getting my first handheld radio after getting my ham radio license. A few days after getting it, I found myself returning the ham radio outlet because I had not managed to talk to anyone with the radio. I wasn't there because I thought something was wrong with the radio. I assumed the problem was user error. The people at HRO were wonderful and looked at my radio to confirm that I programmed the local repeaters correctly. They told me that the repeaters in Orlando were typically quiet and pointed out a couple where I might have more luck talking to someone. A couple of those were on Florida Sarnet, and one was a local repeater connected to the East Coast Reflector. Not that I knew what that was. The next Monday, I found myself listening to the radio on the way to work and selected the repeater for the East Coast Reflector, and of course, I stumbled across the Morning Brew. I listened to the Morning Brew for a couple of days, and then finally got the nerve up to press the PTT button. That was 3 years ago, and today I continue to regularly check into the Morning Brew. To be honest, if it wasn't for the East Coast Reflector, that radio and my license probably would have ended up in a desk drawer collecting dust. When listening to Morning Brew, I developed a curiosity for what it was like to actually run a radio net like that. The Morning Brew is a very fast-paced net, as anyone who has participated knows. The thought of hosting a net was interesting, but intimidating. A couple of months ago, the East Coast Reflector added a new net on Wednesday nights called Open Mic Night. I saw the advertisements for it, but the intimidation of hosting a net was overpowering my curiosity to do so, at least for a few weeks. I think it was the 7th Open Mic Night that I finally found myself hosting. Not only was I hosting it, but I also had the opportunity to start the net, which was even more intimidating. But within a few minutes, I got over nerves and got into a little bit of rhythm and really enjoyed myself. I knew the Dick, WB2JPQ, was in the Zoom room and listening to the radio, and that provided a sense of comfort. I knew he and others had my back, and any mistake I made might be a good laugh, but nothing else. I went on to host the next open mic night the following week, and then again 2 weeks later. I would gladly host the open mic night anytime because I thoroughly enjoy it. But that's not the point of the open mic night. The point is for others to get their opportunity to be a net controller. If you haven't already done it, it's something you really should consider doing. I know the intimidation factor that many people who are thinking about doing are experiencing, but trust me, there's nothing to fear. The worst thing you're going to do is make a mistake that probably hundreds of other people have made before you. When you make a mistake, it's either going to be ignored or everybody's going to enjoy a good laugh, but you won't be laughed at. So I encourage you to sign up for Open Mic Night. Take your shot at being a net controller and do something new in this hobby. Gil, K4GDS.
Social media. The ECR is building up its social media presence. Join our Facebook group so you can enjoy our ham radio content and stay up to date on ECR information, and so you can update us on your ham shack and ask questions. Just like on the air, we don't tolerate trolls. You're free to ask questions troll-free. We keep it an enjoyable place. Check us out also on X, Twitter, groups.io, and YouTube. We look forward to you joining us.
Open Mic Net. The ECR has a one-of-a-kind net. It's an open mic net for net controllers. Every Wednesday night at 8 p.m., we have multiple guest net controllers. You can be on too. No experience necessary. You don't even need to log. If you're interested in being a net controller on our open mic net, sign up at bit.ly/ECR open mic.
You should know. The East Coast Reflector and its Reflector Magazine is all volunteer run. We charge nothing to use the system. We charge nothing to subscribe to the magazine. The system has hundreds of users connected at any given time. We incur a lot of expenses to maintain such a large system. If you use the system or enjoy the magazine, please consider helping by contributing to the system by going to eastcoastreflector.com and click on Donate. Your contribution is greatly appreciated.
comics top image when you follow step-by-step instructions from Google on how to raise your mic gain. Bottom image, Google search results for ladder line.
Net questions. Here's a list of most of our net questions. Ever wonder how your answer compares? Click the question to see the results. There's questions from the Morning Brew, the TechNet, and the TriviaNet.
Field Day Pictures of Lark. Lancaster Amateur Radio Club.
Please pray for Cindy, wife of Charles, KC6UFM. KB2UD, Mike and his wife Deborah. KC4BB, George, Billy, Broadway. Silent Keys. Kive ID Will, from York, Pennsylvania. KB2JMJ James, from Cape May, New Jersey. KBU5 Bill, from Greensboro, Pennsylvania. KF0GTF Allen, from Minnesota City, Minnesota. KC8IDM Steve, from Oregon, Ohio. Please keep these people and their families in your prayers to give them the strength, encouragement, comfort, and peace of mind and heart they need, and have a brief moment of silence.
Thank you for listening to the Reflector Magazine. If you'd like to subscribe, go to bit.ly/ECR subscribe and enter your email. Disclaimer. The content, opinions, and views expressed in this magazine are those of the authors and contributors and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or views of the publisher, editorial team, or affiliated organizations, or anyone else. All articles, images, and information provided are for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. The publisher, ECR, and its volunteers assume no responsibility for errors or omissions in the content provided. Readers are encouraged to verify all information independently. The use of trademarks, logos, and brand names does not imply endorsement. Reproduction or redistribution of any content in this magazine, in whole or in part, without prior written consent from the publisher, is strictly prohibited. For inquiries or permissions, please contact Vicky, ke8vky@ke8vky@gmail.com.